And the second thing that will probably be a little more controversial, I kind of want power back boosts deleted from the game. Because
Hey, welcome back to the channel. I'm actually re-recording this intro because the first one just didn't do it justice. We're completely done with the roundtable interview, and we've got, I had an absolute blast. I have to say, I think I fanboyed here a little bit, having these three guys on the same call at the same time and me getting to ask them questions. We have MP Blaze from Noon, the owner of a fight streak, solo streak, 238. And this is when I asked him like a week or two ago. Check out his videos. So much knowledge and skill in there. DLL, and a BG Alliance leader of SSX Perennial Masters Tier Alliance. His war videos are amazing. If you've been watching my channel, you know how often I'm shouting him out because I learned so much from his videos. And then Taters, the leader of my Alliance and my BG leader. I get these lovely, lovely, lovely attack plans from him every time there is a war. These are three of the smartest players in this game you will ever meet. I guarantee it. I'm fortunate enough to have them on my rankings team for the rankings video I do. And we are going to talk about war and the bans that have been introduced, how they are enjoying it, the meta, how it's potentially shifting that, and also their hopes and what they would love to see increased as far as being able to have more strategy and also more time to plan. It is absolutely fascinating. Before we jump all to that though, we are aware that Blade is now pretty much available in this game as a 6-star. He is obviously becoming more and more prevalent, and we want to talk a little bit about how he may fit into war, but more importantly, if you are fortunate enough to pull him, is he worth ranking up? Make sure you check out all of these guys' channels. They are linked in the description below. I watch them to get better at this game. I had told them that I would tell them to talk, and I didn't there, so that's on me.
happy to be here.
Happy to be here, yeah.
Unmutes, thank you.
All right, I'll find a funny way to edit that, or just leave it alone because I think it was funny for him. I will quickly say that I am grateful for this champion being in the game because he is the only reason DLL let me into his Alliance Evil for War Season 1, because Blade was that good. He made me look like I was competent. And he helped me through Labyrinth of Legends. And I really haven't really played him since. What do you guys think? And let's start off with DLL. What do you think of him as far as rank up wise, for giving rank up advice, that question that you always get of, should I rank up this champion or that champion? And then do you think he has a place in war anymore?
I've been thinking about this a lot. As far as ranking him up, I think he might fall into the same category as like Guardian or Angela for general content use, where for certain accounts, the 5-star may actually be a better investment because the way his SIG scales with the healing and how much power it consumes, a low SIG blade is miserable to play, but even the lower stats on a 5-star at max SIG would probably feel better. But I know we don't really use 5-stars in war much anymore. I do think there are a few places where he could be used, mainly the power gain on bleed. That feels like something that could be very relevant. And, the healing isn't buff reliant. That was big when he came out. It's not nothing even now. I don't think you want to rely on the danger sense. I think there are places to use him, but some of the places where that power gain is best, like some of the strike counter nodes or something, they either punish well-timed blocks or they don't allow you to gain power that way, like the power struggle node, or there are just little limitations throughout the map that kind of get in the way of the parts of his kit I think are still relevant. So I'm not sure I think he's that big a deal now, but I could see him mattering on a future map.
And then let's go Blaze and then Taters. What do you guys think?
And just pretty much everything DLL said. I would point out that at max power he's shrugging debuffs like crazy, and because Stark Spider-Man came out with a feature the old feature, there are a lot more people that have him. So the investment to me, especially if you're going to use him in war, is whether or not you're bringing along Stark Spidey and whether or not you have him ranked up as well. We've had a couple guys doing some pretty crazy things with Stark Spider-Man because he's ending fights before any node abilities become a problem, such as EMP. So to me, it's just going to depend on, you know, who has what available.
Yeah, I think I don't think that the signature ability is really a huge deal for war use as much if you're running a 6-3. Just because I think if you're going to send in a Blade, you're sending him in because he checks a lot of boxes and because in the right matchups, which is something that, you know, I think as planners, we're always trying to give our people the, you know, top matchups. In the right matchups, he should end those fights pretty quickly. The thing that Blaze said about him shrugging off debuffs is probably the biggest asset for him in war situations. But again, you know, you would have to build up to that, you know, the 3 bars to get that maximum metabolism or whatever it's called. So I think that he's probably going to be most useful in lower tiers. I think at high tiers and master tier, honestly, if you're sending out a Blade, you know, you're probably either flexing or you're giving somebody with a couple easy fights or just a small workload something to have fun with. I think that in most matchups, even with the bans, where you would, you know, think of Blade, you're probably going to have more versatile and potentially safer options in different champions. So yeah, I don't know. I think he's a really, really strong champ in general. I think what DLL said about questing use, I think that that's still definitely going to be his main use, especially with, you know, Stark Spider-Man is a high DPS champ. He's got a really low health pool, though. I know that those guys in Noon are, you know, top level players, but
yeah,
I would never assign a Stark Spider-Man for actual war fights. So, yeah, I think that he's, I think that he's got some use in war, in very select matchups, and requiring that top Mystic counters are banned. And again, it would really be for like specialty matchups where maybe you have a guy that you've got a free player with 3 free roster spots, and you've got one tricky node that you just want somebody to be able to mow through.
I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense, and I just kind of want to, I guess maybe I would set the table a little bit. Is you have 3 really amazing war minds here, and they're all going to approach things a little bit differently. And I think you heard that too. Like Blaze is in Noon, who, I mean, how many times have you guys made top 3 recently, Blaze?
I've been here 9 seasons, and I think we missed it 2 of them.
Okay, so right there, he didn't say 7. He said we've missed it. So that kind of gives you an idea of like how what the expectations are and the skill level of them. And you heard Taters kind of mention that too. Of I don't know if I would assign this Stark Spider-Man because of his low health pool. And just my own personal relevance or story to that is, I was like, hey, you know, I really think Professor X could do some things. He's like, yeah, I don't think I'd assign a rank 3 though. And I was like, what if he was at rank 4? And Taters basically back to me, he was like, yeah, still pretty sure I wouldn't assign him. and you know, and I'm a decent player. And so it's just the way war is approached in the different BGs and different alliances. And then the other thing I felt like I heard there though was this is still a quality champion. So if like you pull them, this is still someone that's worth ranking. I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth. Did anyone feel like, no, even if you pulled him, this might not be a champion that you want to rank up? And we can start with Blaze and Taters and then DLL for just kind of quick thoughts on just general, if someone pulls them, would you think, yeah, this is a sensible rank up?
Yeah, I mean, he's still got a lot to his kit that is relevant with the way the contest has evolved. So I myself wouldn't shy away from possibly ranking him to rank 3, and my roster is a lot larger than maybe someone down in tier 4 or even lower. So I definitely wouldn't shy away from it.
Yeah, I agree. I've been thinking, like, if I pulled him out of the next feature or something like that, I would take him up right away, unawakened. But again, I think all four of us, including you, Vega, I mean, we've all got pretty developed rosters. I don't know. I've got plenty of skilled champs that I use in war, so he's good enough that I think he deserves to. Like Blaze said, he checks a lot of boxes, so yeah. I would rank him up for sure.
Yeah, no disagreement there. And the skill class in general is still fairly light on having champions that really benefit from a high sig. A lot of them are very good unawakened or low sig. So if you're not relying on skill stones for your prestige, there is still an argument to be made to invest in him. And I think one other thing I really want to point out is that out of those synergy champions, Spark probably isn't going to get touched anytime soon, but Mephisto and Dormammu might. Yeah. And Mephisto is already a counter that some people like to use on the Incinerate and Poison Hazard Shift node. And when you factor in, his ability to lock down certain mystics and the debuff shrugging, especially if Mephisto gets buffed or Dormammu gets extra abilities, becomes more viable, I could see myself potentially assigning them in a team.
Yeah.
Yeah. When Mephisto's been held back in our alliance due to high ground. We used to use him for the stun immune hazard shift mini, but there's always a high ground champ there now, so we're not risking that massive incinerate increase.
All right. Well, I think that covers it really well. It sounds like consensus is, Blade still definitely has a role. He is not long gone. The contest hasn't completely moved him by. I think a lot of it is just due to he was so insanely powerful and solved a problem that was very much present in Alliance War at that time. All right, so let's go ahead and move into the war section of all of this, which is why we brought all three of you together. I'm very excited to hear all your thoughts. I'm going to do as little talking as I possibly can. And the first question we have, and we'll start off with Taters and then go Blaze and DLL, is how are you enjoying the bans? How are you enjoying them? And are they enhancing or detracting from what you love about war? So I guess it's kind of multiple parts there. It's like, what do you love about war? And then how are the bans either helping intensify that or taking away from it?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably anybody that is familiar at all with my channel knows that I'm very pro bans. I think that it's been an awesome and much needed addition. Obviously there are some things that I think need to get adjusted or corrected, and I think that that's one of the questions that you're going to touch on a little bit later, so I don't want to get into that, but it's absolutely making things a lot more enjoyable for me. I've said it before, as a player that doesn't have a 200 plus streak like these other guys on this call, I'm like maybe a slightly above average player. I really kind of just focus on the planning aspect. That's kind of where I see my biggest value. So in that sense, I get most of my enjoyment out of the planning aspect, and it's been a lot more fun to really kind of try to figure things out and kind of feel like you're either outsmarting or getting outsmarted by the other alliances, battle group officer and stuff like that. So it's been great for me. It's been it's added to war exactly what I was hoping it would add, again with some adjustments that I think that could be made here in the future. But yeah, I love it.
I'm loving it too. Again, same points. I think we're going to end up opening the floodgates about what could be tweaked, as Taters mentioned, because I definitely have some thoughts on that too. But I'm loving it. I think I love it the most, or I think I love it because of how much I love the aspect of war, which is that it's almost the same content, but with different champions being affected by different nodes just because of the different placements between alliances. But because we get to interact with the same type of nodes for 12 straight wars in 4 weeks, I'm not one to go take one path in Act 7, 100 times in a week. But in War, I definitely encounter all these things, and I see it when we're talking about planning. So we get to be creative with matchups. And instead of just not having bans and always assigning the same thing or being like, why would we send this other option nukes it, we have the two of the most consistent bans not as options. So we get to see a colorful profile on an attacking scale. So yeah, that aspect or that reason is the reason I enjoy War, and I'm loving that bans exist.
Yeah, I love two of the words that Blaze used in particular. Creative and nukes are really important to me, because so often, like he said, you would go, this one champion that we've never assigned in War before might be the absolute perfect counter to that particular fight. But this other champion will probably finish it in 45 seconds, so why should we even bother? And bans haven't completely erased that problem, but especially with the recent changes to the map this season, they've gotten around it a little bit. And I've definitely found myself assigning some more varied teams. I sent out 2 Nimrods this last war, like on 2 different teams, and I sent out 2 Nebulas on another war. The first 3 wars we sent a man thing when we never had before. Like, there's just been a bunch of little things where losing those top clear options has really opened up room for creativity in finding, no, this is exactly the champion we want for that. But I will say that I think this is somewhat along the lines of what Taters was getting at. While bans kind of enhance everything I love about War as a player and intellectually, I think they are also making everything that bothers me about being an officer a little bit worse. So I really do not want to make this completely unalloyed praise.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll get into that.
Yeah.
I think Blaze and I are definitely saving our criticisms.
There's definitely going to be if there was any changes you'd like to see, we'll get to that portion. So I heard a lot of interesting stuff in there, and I think it moves us nicely into the second question, which is has it shifted the meta as far as how you plan defenses and or offenses, right? And I think that's something important to keep in mind is you're not just planning offenses, you're also planning the whole defensive setup for your BG. And so one of the things that was said, and Blaze has been showing this, MP Blaze has been showing this in his videos of Man-Thing can actually do things. I actually myself just took him to rank 3, and that's something that I really enjoy about the rankings that we do is there's only 4 columns. Oh, maybe there's 5 now. But even the 3rd or 4th one down is saying no, these champions are worthy of taking to rank 3. They can do exceptionally good things for you and see through a lot of content. And I do feel like War is currently at least a little bit showing us that, and it's a very cool thing to see. So let's start off with DLL and then go Taters and Blaze. Has in your opinion, has it shifted the meta as far as how you plan defenses and offenses?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely shifted, I think, more on offense than on defense, because a lot of us were already doing things defensively to try and cut off some of the biggest, most popular options. But there are still some things you can do, and a couple of the slightly less popular bans allow you to, if you just get rid of that, then that's one less thing you have to think about, and you can do things on defense that always before you went, no, we can't do that because it will charge up this person, or it's vulnerable to this person, or it lines up and we'll take 7 fights in a row with that person. But I think offensively, it's even better because, like I said, if you take off the best option, oftentimes there's a clear second best. But sometimes we've just never explored that space, and there are 3 or 4 different ones, and maybe you find that on this node, out of those 3 or 4 obvious options, sometimes it's this one, sometimes it's that one. And then ranking up a bunch of different options across the BG matters. Like, I'll say that I've actually even asked some people in my battle group, I would like an Icarus at some point. Even though he's like completely new and unproven, there are a few matchups where I'm like, actually, that would line up perfectly.
Really?
And there are those kinds of things that I've never really been able to think about before because, Torch probably nukes it.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of like the defense meta shifting, I'm not like, we've obviously seen some meta placements kind of start to populate a little bit, and I think for planning for defense, I think I'm still kind of trying to figure it out, because and DLL has actually touched on this on a video that he posted about this topic, but there are varying opinions on how to approach the bans from a defense standpoint, and that is obviously going to vary drastically based on what tier of war you're in. But at the top tier, where if you want to win consistently, you really need to be in that kind of 4 to 6 range. Very, very low. There are definitely some different opinions on how to approach the defense. So I don't really know if the meta has shifted as much. We'll see what MP Blaze says too. But for attack, I definitely agree with DLL. Like, Vega, you're every other day you're PMing me, hey, do you want me to rank this guy and this guy, because your resources are endless. But it definitely does make me want more variety in our battle group rosters. And again, as always, it's really kind of a just in case type of thing. But there are plenty of kind of off brand champs that I've thought about when planning. It's like, who has this? So maybe it's only one person. I need them for something else. Man, I really wish maybe we had some other people that had this champ and liked him enough to rank him. But yeah, and then what DLL said for the first question, I think applies to the attack meta. Just using different champs has really kind of enhanced the experience, and that's the whole point, really, of bans. So, I don't think I added much substance to that question there, but I'm going to cut myself off now.
Yeah, so I'm not going to be able to add much more. So what I'll say for shifting defense is that if you don't know me, I hate doing defense for the reason that I like planning for offense sometimes. That when I'm placing defense, I have an issue of going, no, so-and-so can take this. So-and-so can take this. So let me move him here. No, so-and-so can take this. And I end up frying my brain to frustration and just settling on something that I don't think is going to work out very well.
Yeah.
And then the straw that breaks the camel's back is when someone tells me, why is so-and-so on this node?
Yeah.
So I don't touch defenses. Fortunately enough, New Nation has one guy kind of doing all the defenses, and then he bounces ideas up to us when he needs opinions. But offense, it definitely shifts the meta. My question would be, does it shift it enough? I might want a little bit more, and when we get to later questions, we'll probably talk about that. The biggest, if you watch my videos, the most obvious sign as to whether it has shifted the offense meta is my war attack team. I'm not taking in Human Torch. I'm not taking 10 fights of war. I'm not taking in Quake. I've got like 5 to 7 fights of war, and I'm using champions like Man-Thing, Silver Centurion. Not many people use Mr. Negative, even though I've been using him for a while. So it definitely has shifted the meta on offense.
Yeah, one thing that's interesting is I think everyone said Human Torch. And obviously, I think he's been banned in every war, or obviously not every war, but a certain, a large amount. I actually am going to probably go back at this point and look. I don't know if I got assigned Human Torch in a single war last season. And so, and then this season, I have been assigned no Torch, but I've also taken fights with now 9 different attackers. So we've had 6 wars, right? And I've used 9 different attackers. So even if it's not like your go-to was banned, it's still changing or having an effect on the attackers you're taking in. It went a weird way of saying that, but I think ultimately the point came across. All right. And then let's move on to this, and then we'll get to the big one, which is the adjustment, which I can tell we're excited to talk about, is the biggest surprises so far in Season 31. And then additionally, like once you kind of name your 1 or 2 surprises or something there, what advice would you give to a player who's looking to move up? I know that this has been a topic since War Season 2. I remember people actively talking about this. Is like, how can anyone ever move up? And yet, obviously, it happens. But what's the advice as an alliance leader, as a BG leader, as an attack planner? What are the things that you would say to players who want to move up? Because War can be really fun. Let's start with Taters and go to DLL and then Blaze on this one.
All right, so biggest surprise, I don't really have an answer for that. I just want to leave that to DLL and Blaze. But I do want to touch on the second part of that question, because it's something that I get PM'd about a lot, 15 to 20 times a week. People that are looking to join For Loki or be on our wait list. And a lot of times they're really shooting for the stars. They're not really qualified. And that leads to a conversation or a brief conversation about like, how do I get there? So I think the biggest thing that a player can do if they're looking to like move up a bracket or from like Platinum to a Perennial Masters Alliance is understand what's going to get you eliminated from consideration right away. You can be the nicest dude and you can be like, you can brag about how good you are in War and all that stuff. But ultimately, like, there are baselines for any alliance to bring somebody in. Unfortunately, one of those baselines is prestige. So most alliances on their homepage will have what their prestige minimum is. I really think it's a good idea to get as close as possible to that number. And obviously, if you can eclipse that number, that's like step 1. And honestly, if you're contacting an officer below that limit that is visible clearly on their homepage, that officer is probably not going to respect you very much. So just don't do that. But that would be number 1. And then also, I think one of the underrated aspects of like being a sought after option for people or being an attractive recruit for alliances is having a diverse roster that isn't filled with all of the normal champs that everybody has. Now, if you have like a humongous roster with all those champs plus a bunch of kind of niche champs, then that's one thing. But I think having that diversity in your roster is actually an attractive element. And a lot of times when we're looking to bring a replacement in from our wait list, we are looking at who has this combination of champs so that we can kind of fill the void that's left by the person that left. But I would just also recommend that people like reach out to somebody and just ask like, hey, what do I need to do to get on your wait list? And you definitely want to try to inch your way up bracket by bracket. If your goal is master and you're in gold, you definitely want to try to find a platinum alliance first and just prove yourself. Be nice to people because most people in masters have a lot of contacts and they will, kind of check their references and the people that they know. And so that's pretty much it. I mean, the first thing is just don't get eliminated right away because of prestige. Diversify your attack roster. And then just ask somebody like, hey, this is where I want to be. Tell me how to get there. And you have to be patient and just kind of go through the steps.
It was funny because you're right. Most alliances do post their prestige minimum.
None of ours.
And yeah, not a single one of us does. But hey, yeah.
All right. So my biggest surprise so far for season 31. This is the first season I've gotten to use Apocalypse. And I'm actually surprised at how little he's been banned for War because he's pretty nuts. And you can pretty much ban technically 2 other champions as options. And I'm speaking of Archangel and Cable for specific nodes in War. So that would be my biggest surprise for season 31. My advice, I mean, Taters talked about all of it. I'm sure DLL is going to talk about all of it. Prestige, larger route, right? Like a diverse and large roster. Those are all things that would be like baseline to get in. But what advice I would give somebody is that know the champs you have ranked up. If an officer can tell when you're being recruited, and there are two ways they could tell, that they don't need to babysit you as much as someone else, then your value goes up exponentially. And the two ways you can prove to an officer that you don't have to be babysat is, one, record almost all of your war fights. If they can see you in action, your mistakes too, then it's a little bit easier to get a gist of, how does this person fight? And then if you're able to break down and explain, the node you took, the actions you took in the fight, or like the reasons you died and how you're going to adjust it next time, those are easier conversations to have with someone that you're going to send down a path that you're not sure if it's going to go because they're new. If you're already, thinking about those, and it takes a lot of stress off of the officers when they don't have to babysit you.
Yeah,
sorry, go on.
No, sorry, Dale. I know I'm interrupting, but I don't want to forget this because I'm going to talk from personal experience here. I would always suggest, give it a chance. I've talked to so many players where they're like, I want to move up in war, but I'm worried about embarrassing myself. I'm like, yeah, everyone is. It's very normal. And DLL, you personally experience this many times where and Taters, you have too actually now, is I'll go and my roster will get me in somewhere. And then I'll realize I'm in over my head. And I don't want to just sit there and be that problem or the one that needs to be babysat or whatever. And so I'll voluntarily leave. Don't make the alliance kick you. And that's always, trust your officers. If they're telling you you're doing fine, then you are. But don't make them kick you and then be like, I'm going to step down. And I'm going to sit down for a season or two. I'm going to record my fights like Blaze was saying. And then I'm going to come back. And I'm going to come back as a better player. And I've done that so many times since season 1 or 2 or whatever it was. And it's always worked out well. And it's been extremely helpful to me to the success, to become the player that I am now. And I'm proud of that level of player. So DL, go ahead.
Yeah, all of those points are really, really good. To speak to the advice on how to move up, part of this might be, I know the three of us here approach war in a certain way, but this is part of why Taters said that just being skilled is not enough, because there are very mechanically skilled players that still die because if you assign them with a champion other than the 2 or 3 that they love playing the most, there are interactions they will have missed. If you have a champion at rank 3, you should know how to use them. This is a really big thing for a lot of top alliances, but also something I've kind of been harping on recently, is just if you have somebody up and you would not feel comfortable if your officer assigned them in the next offense, find a place to use them. Don't burn through Cavalier Event Quest with Torch. Use the Science Champion you just ranked. Learn how to take them against various different fights. Like somebody like Overseer. If you just ranked Overseer, don't try and nuke down the content you're doing. Go use Overseer for it. And when you do that, and you really know all these characters in your roster, then one thing that means is it becomes easier for whoever you reached out to at that alliance to pitch you to everyone else. Because whoever is being brought in, it's probably a communal decision. And if you have convinced an officer at a top alliance that you should be there, they're probably going to have to convince other officers who have also been reached out to by other people who are just as qualified as you are. And this is another reason why you don't want to be punching up on prestige, that kind of thing. Anything you can do to make yourself an easy pitch, this guy has all of his war fights recorded, this woman has all of these attackers ranked up, has videos from last season of her using every last one of them. anything like that makes it way easier for you to be like my guy when I'm talking to the other officers and to convince them.
Yeah.
That's such a good point. And just to jump in, we kind of talked a bit this off the recording, but who you know is really a big component there too. And specifically, you know, if you're an unknown and you're just trying to move up, you know, a lot of players in Masters tier have YouTube channels. Like, start watching those, start leaving comments. Even if your motive is ultimately to try to get seen and get in there, like, leave comments. Like what Blaze said, understanding how to break down fights. Like, leave comments like, hey man, I took this fight with this champ. You know, stuff like that, just so that you're recognizable. Because like what DLL said, like, there are so many people on all of our wait lists, right? There are so many people that we could be like, this guy, I'm sure we could bring him in. He would be fine. He would be able to operate in war. But like, the way to like kind of stand out is the things that MP Blaze and DLL said, but adding to that, like, you know, for Loki, like, yeah, if this guy is vouching for you, whether it's an officer or more specifically, a lot of our players have YouTube channels and they're kind of active in the community and stuff. So if they know you from like that community, and they vouch for your character and stuff like that, and whatever, the culture fit aspect, that's a huge deal. And we've had some players that we took a quote unquote a chance on that were a little bit lower on the prestige side, a little bit underdeveloped with their rosters, and they've worked out like really well. Like Lizer was one of them, and I think she's one of the most valuable people in the Alliance. She's one of the best players in the Alliance, and I mean, she's really an invaluable member of the Alliance, and she was somebody that ultimately we quote unquote took a chance on because of internal recommendations and stuff.
That's crazy to hear that she was ever considered taking a chance on. Like, you know, joining.
It's crazy in hindsight.
Yeah, like
she had low prestige. She's going to be fine hearing this, but yeah, she had low prestige, a pretty limited roster, but I got a lot of, hey, we really got to give her a shot here type of thing. And a lot of that goes back to SSX too. A lot of the people, obviously spoke to a lot of the people there, trying to kind of, you know, validate her qualifications. And I don't know that she's ever made an enemy. So a lot of people were saying good things. But anyway, that's just kind of part of the recruiting process.
That's awesome. Thanks, guys, for all of that. And then let's move on to the part that I think all of you are most excited to finally get to, is any adjustments you'd like to see in season 32 and beyond, right? Like, we wanted the bans, they're now here. It sounds like we're all enjoying them. This game appears to have a lot of legs left. What would you like to see in the next season? And just let's have fun with this. So let's go DLL, Taters, Blaze, and then at that point, let's just open it up, like, because I'm sure someone's going to say something, someone else wants to bounce off of that. So let's just have some of it afterwards.
Yeah. I have two big things that I want from War. The first one, I think I get a fair amount of support on, which is that I think that there should be dedicated planning time and that there should be a fair amount of it. One thing that comes up is I've heard some people say, it's like, well, you know, it wouldn't eat into the attack phase if it was just like a dedicated 3-hour spot or something. It's like, okay, but then anyone who's working at that time, anyone who's asleep at that time can't be a part of the process. How much is it actually helping? And so I want there to be like 12 hours minimum where we can talk as an alliance, as a battle group, hammer these things out, and just make the job of officers easier and possibly open it up so that more people can do that job in the first place. And the second thing that will probably be a little more controversial, I kind of want power back boosts deleted from the game. Because I think that once we have these bans in place, a lot of the things that I dislike most about the war meta come down to those items specifically.
DLL went hard.
Yeah, I was like, whoa.
That's interesting. Can I jump in?
Yeah, let's go for it.
I had 4 like things, 2 immediate things for next season, and then 2 kind of stretch things that it would be impossible, I think, for them to do for next season. One of them is the planning phase that DLL talked about, and I think I'm okay to talk about this, and Vega would know, but I have pitched this concept to Kabam and the CCP, specifically. You have whatever your placement phase, and then just adding another phase, like you mentioned, DLL, of at least 12 hours where you can see the other defense, but everything is locked. Just let the officers get to it when they get to it, so that, you know, I'm not scheduling meetings around when I have to plan war attack, which is something, you know, I do. And it's kind of embarrassing to admit to adults that don't play this game. But so that's a huge thing. I have pitched that, and I'm hoping that that's something that gains traction. The power back boost thing is really interesting. This isn't one of my 2 desired adjustments for next season, but I did make a video about how I felt like we could improve war. I think it's been almost a year since that video came out. One of the suggestions in that video was allow players to choose only 1 silver boost for the entirety of the war. Oh. So if that's a power back boost, you know, I know that you were talking about class boost, but if that's like a silver boost, like a PS1 boost or whatever, then they can't use the invulnerability, something like that. So kind of on the same topic as what you were saying, DLL, like anything that we can do to make things a little bit more strategically relevant than, you know, boosting maximum for every fight, which is a part of the game, and that's what we do in 4 Loki as well. But I think that would add a lot more strategy to the whole process, and in turn I think that a lot more people would enjoy it.
All right, let me jump in here, because this is getting really interesting here. And Blaze, I'd like you to answer this first. Is listening to you guys, you know, one thing I'm hearing is like more time, and I would be hard pressed to find the person that's like, no, this is good. We want you scheduling your days around, you know, this 1 hour that you have to get plans out. But then this power back boost, or the limiting to the gray boost, is how much of this though would you be like your own worst enemy? Meaning you've just made planning that much harder on yourself. I think I'm not a planner. Like, people ask me, you know, what's a good option for, you know, Bishop on Note 11? And my mind goes literally blank. Like, I'm like, Ultron, I think. And so Blaze, like, based on what you are hearing about this, like extended planning time, and then also potentially the removal or limiting of boosts, how do you think that actually plays out? Like, what are you thinking when you hear that?
So, I mean, definitely having more time is awesome. A war plan, you know, if you're like, boom, I know everything and I know exactly who's going where, and it's just kind of flowing, it takes about an hour and a half to 2.5 hours. If you find some problematic things, people aren't responding, I'd actually add that too. There's another aspect where you're probably asking someone, hey, is this matchup going to be okay with you? Who would you like to take in? And they don't respond because they're at work. That's, you know, more added time. So it could take upwards of 4 or 5 hours, maybe at a cap of 6, depending on how available everyone is. But if you have the minimum 12, you obviously don't have to worry about those issues. And then if you change the way power back boosts work, which do alter kind of matchups, because instead of, you know, sending CGR and saying this fight's going to be over as soon as you hit SP2, and then it's just SP2, SP3, or SP2 and done. You have to kind of plan with the person taking it a little bit more. You have to tell them to slow down, this, that, and the other. But if we have a minimum of 12 hours to think about that, to discuss that, then it's not as stressful when you take those power back boosts away. Again, minimum 12 hours. So yeah, we'd have more time to plan, but we'd have more time to actually have a discussion about it, instead of being like, well, this is what you got. Good luck.
Yeah, and one of the things that sounded like all three of you said you enjoy about war is the strategy. And it sounds like this would increase the strategy while also giving you a reasonable, like you're not asking for like a luxurious amount of time to plan, but a reasonable amount of time to plan. Does that sound pretty accurate?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then Blaze,
I really think it should be 24 hours, honestly, because
Right.
Yeah.
you know, a lot of players, most of the top alliances have European, players that are live in Europe or whatever, and again, like Blaze was saying, like sometimes you do have to have conversations with people before you're doing a plan, and their answer might affect the entire map depending on how the puzzle fits.
Yeah.
But that would mean every war is essentially a 3-day process, which is, something that Kabam would have to kind of wrap their head around. So I think that would help the officers. That would solve all of the officer stuff that has been increased by this. Like, that would perfectly solve it. Like, just give us more time.
Right.
I have a question though.
If you're, sorry, go ahead.
Let me, and then
I was just gonna say that, like, the other things Taters suggested, and I've seen his video about this, pretty much every good suggestion I've ever heard to make war better further also translates to more planning. So at some point, we're just gonna have to deal with that.
And then Blaze, you didn't get a chance to even list any of your ideas. What are some of those?
Oh, so I mean, I've seen Tater's video, and there are a ton of, and heard DLL's comment about power back boosts before. I mean, there are a ton of great ideas and other options that I think are just fantastic that I would love to see. But when I read adjustments, I was thinking about like what's already in place, because Kabam has been doing like minor adjustments over time instead of bringing in something huge and new. I mean, bans are the most recent huge and new thing. But what I've noticed with bans is that we have two consistently holding a place for the most part, which are Human Torch and Ghost. And earlier we talked about the meta shifting on offense and how I said I probably could see it shifting more with a few adjustments. And that's where this question kind of comes in. I would think that maybe Kabam takes one more step forward towards bans and selects a champion to be banned for an entire season, putting us at 4 bans instead of the 3. I don't want to go too far and say that we should maybe jump to 5 or 6 bans, because at the moment with season 31, we have a global that doesn't actually restrict too many attack options when planning out a war. And what I would hate to say is let's jump to 5 or 6 bans, and then we end up with a global that actually prevents 2 to 3 other options on top of that. And we've had globals in the past where we're like, no, we're not taking in this champ. You're not doing that matchup because that's just terrible and you're asking to die. And we don't have that with high ground. We can just be like, hey, Doom kind of feeds it. Just be smart and get rid of the shock sooner.
Yeah, that's a really interesting thing, because one conversation I've had with people is, I think I talked to one person who flat out said, I want there to be 5 bans so that I can ban Torch, Mr. Fantastic, Mr. Negative, Spider-Man 2099, and Overseer. And I'm like, that sounds miserable. Like, it sounds effective, but it sounds miserable. And so I think that I think 3 was an interesting starting point. I know we all know Kabam was trying to be conservative here.
Right.
I think if they go much beyond that, I might like to see a limitation in place where no more than 2 of a single class are banned.
Yeah.
Because the way class relationships work in this game with that wheel, it could get really unpleasant really quickly.
Right. There'd be a bottleneck somewhere.
I think you can also solve, and sorry, I'm recycling old ideas, but you could also solve that by limiting champ bans per season to a certain number. So, like, you can only ban this champ 3 times this season. right? So that pulls in the whole matchup element. If you look at your matchup screen and the plus minus is telling you that you should, have a strong advantage in this matchup, then maybe you hold back one of your bans for one of the more overpowered champs like Ghost or Torch, and you go with something a little bit more conservative. I think that would help a lot. I also think it would be really nice to increase the number of bans. I think that 3 is exactly what DLL said. It's just kind of a very easy starting point. 4 would be, I think, really good. And then what Blaze said with having a champ that's just banned for a season, I think would be great. And I think Kabam could really do a lot of interesting things by with their seasonal themes, with providing certain class tags with ban immunity, so those champs can't get banned throughout the entire season. Maybe they pick somebody that relates to the theme of the season as their one that is going to be banned for every war, and then you have your 3 that you can choose with ban limitations, so that you have to be more strategic about who you're banning when, so that it's not just, okay, who's the 3rd guy who's getting banned this war in addition to Torch and Ghost.
Right. There's a lot of potential with it, and there are a lot of different ways it could go.
Yeah. And all of those sound interesting to me, but we definitely need time. I actually was going to say, along the idea of the 3-day wars, I think my current vote on that scheme would be to go from seasons being 12 wars over 28 days to 10 wars over 30 days. And that means that you lose the break on Wednesdays, but I think it would be worth it. And that way you're not cutting out a full third of wars. But I don't know.
Well, here's a question as a non-planner is, why do we need a 3rd day? And I assume the idea is you need the 24 hours for Platonus. So what I'm really saying is what if there was a system where as officers you could just pull a champion from your BG mates roster and place them? If defense placement was really an hour, would that work, or are there problems with that?
My only hesitation on that, besides them designing such a system, but I imagine it would probably just be an evolution of the part of your profile where you pick your defenders and attackers. But my only hesitation on that is that because AQ is currently on an 8-day rotation, and none of the proposals we've mentioned would put war in line with that, you need a window somewhere to move people.
Yeah.
100% right, yeah. Good call.
The other thing I would bring in about that is that if I was picking someone's defenders and they were asleep, I don't know if they fell asleep with suicides on or not.
Oof.
Yeah. You're right, it just doesn't work.
Yeah, it just doesn't work.
That's something I hadn't considered, because I actually, I kind of assumed at some point Kabam would roll out an evolution of that part of the profile, like you said, but I hadn't considered masteries, because that's so huge in our tier.
We have an entire BG that's Europe, so if I wanted to place for White Mummy just so that they're there and he could move them around when he woke up, I don't know who in BG3 still has suicides on because they're not awake.
All right, so obviously that idea has too many problems. I just, as a person who doesn't do planning, I'd be bummed that. Or are we still getting 3 wars a week? It sounds like there'd be 2 wars a week, right? 2 attacks.
If you added a planning phase,
12-hour placement and 12-hour planning phase. And honestly, the planning phase is really, I do think that it needs to be a minimum of 12 hours. But at the same time, a lot of us are probably going to have a war plan figured out within those first few hours. I don't know if that makes a difference, but the first 24 hours could be placement, or it could be 12-hour placement, 12-hour planning, and then you have your 12 or 24-hour attack.
Right.
I honestly wouldn't mind that at all.
Yeah, I think that 12 hours is enough to get around your time zone concerns, because maybe another battle group is asleep for the first 8 hours of that. and then they still have 4 hours to plan.
You don't think you
Which
guys
is
will
honestly plenty.
You don't think you'll run into the scenario that I feel like comes up once a week though, which is like, sorry, I'm really grinding this arena. I'll get it in as soon as I can. And then I feel like that almost always means, great. In about 4 hours, the whole BG is going to have to be tagging this person online to remind them to put in there.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I have been way too close, way too often.
My threats have evolved. Vega, I'm sure, love like when I post like the defense. It's like, how is he going to make this sound more threatening? Because nobody's gotten kicked. But
Yeah, you know, one thing that would fix that is if we all had mastery presets and one of them was labeled defender and it was free to switch in and out of. And when your officers placed your defenders, it automatically used that setup.
You're asking too much, DLL.
I think that that's pretty. I think that
I don't know, man.
That's also. And people listening to this are like, bro, you don't have any clue.
Yeah.
I have no idea how much coding this is. Whatever they said.
No, I know.
Yeah.
That was mostly a sideways comment about I want free mastery swaps.
Oh,
I know
right.
that implementation would be very difficult.
So I actually think this is fascinating. Is there anything else about like adjustments, things that you would like to see, even if it is a little not far fetched, but like, because I have to say, and I've been saying this for a while, I feel like they're building a whole new game. I feel like a while back, instead of just putting another band-aid on the parry bug, they're like, no, we're fixing the underlying problem here. And it's going to be painful because it usually is to fix an underlying problem. And I know January's been a little dry and people aren't excited about February, but I have to say, I feel like I'm seeing signs of a very cool the rest of 2022. It might be wrong, it might be wrong.
I have two adjustments.
Yeah, so what else?
One Taters said in his video way back when he was talking about how he would revamp war, and it was a limited item use by you got what you were allowed to use for this war, and that's it. Not like the 15 item cap. I wouldn't say reduce that, because if you just change that from 15 to 7, then you just have a bunch of people buying bigger potions.
Yeah.
Whereas others can't maybe do that. But if you received in your inventory all you were allowed for that war, or something that was only available on the path, that way it doesn't have to be mailed to you.
That's clever.
I feel like that would kind of like level the playing field a little bit. It's a good equalizer or something like that. That was one.
Yeah.
Of
Do we
the
want to?
items on the path. That's awesome.
Yeah, because I feel like sending out an email every war is going to be tedious and probably difficult to do. But if it's on the path, a little bit easier. And then the other was, I don't want to see the war fight time anymore. Like, I don't want to see it. If it's behind closed doors and then you could like show it, like I don't know for you planners if it bugs you, but when people are like, hey, we need to get this fight time down, it looks like we're going to die this war, are you guys not boosting hard enough? It kind of irks me a little bit, because it's like, do you have any idea how much extra I'm going to have to talk about this war or plan to get the fight time under the opponent's fight time now that we've already planned war?
Hey, everybody, take risks.
Yeah. So
Right.
just to be clear, because I think I misunderstood in the very beginning, you're not talking about the timer that's going down when you're actually in the fight. You're talking about the calculation of the fights that you've all taken.
Correct. So the
Okay.
the displayed fight time when you look at the score of war.
Yeah.
Or at the very least, they could add it to the factors on the other side that you can't see until the war is over. Like, maybe you
Right,
can see
question.
your own, but not theirs, like diversity.
I have to say, I'm shocked to hear you
That
say
would be a
this,
good change.
because Blaze, didn't you wasn't it last season? Wasn't it you that put out a war video where you guys knew you were losing the time duration badly, and you?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I could.
It was last season, obviously before the extended off season, and they had cleared all their fights, and it was tied. and we knew what their fight time was.
Yeah.
And we just started telling everybody to max boost, throw on suicides if the fight could even handle a suicide mastery, and just get this time under theirs now. And yeah, it was a rush, and it was probably the craziest war I think I've ever been a part of, and I've been a part of quite a few crazy wars while I've been in New Nation. But it's still very stressful. That was a total game plan change in the last 2 hours of war, and I couldn't put my phone down. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I have to tell you, it made for a very enjoyable video, and I still remember it. So if that's any consolation to you, there it is, right?
Yeah. I mean, I guess there's always going to be a silver lining.
There's one other thing that I think that they can implement next season, and that I believe they intended to implement this season, and they kind of backed out of it, and that's to enable per BG bans, so that, you know, we don't have to have discussions about who we're banning for the entire alliance and have, you know, differences of opinion between battle groups. If BG1 wants to ban, you know, these 3 champs, and I want to ban 3 different champs or 2 different champs, then, you know, I think that would be really a really good adjustment, because, you know, as it is right now, it feels like, and this is not a knock, because again, I agree with what you said, Vega, about how I do see some positive strides being made, but it does feel like the minimum implementation of the ban system, like the absolute minimum. It's like you guys have to pick your 3, and you just have to decide who it's going to be between all battle groups. And we already know, like we've talked about, 90% of the wars are going to include the same 2 champs as ban picks. So anyway.
Yeah, and I mean, let's keep in mind too, it was just like 2 wars ago where I think all of us were a little bit like, is this season really getting canceled again? So, you know, I bounce back and forth between unbridled enthusiasm and just being completely distraught.
Yeah. It's funny when you said a whole new game, because another game that I play is moving from the like middle of the trilogy, the second game, to the third that's coming out in like a week.
Uh-huh.
And I feel like if this were an old school $60 AAA game,
yep,
we probably would be seeing another number attached to it. Absolutely. Right about now. So I think you're right on there.
That's a great analogy, and that's the way I've kind of been viewing it. I think you guys all know, and I don't want to go into the balancing conversation. You know, I have my concerns about it. I think all of us made videos on it. But I think even that could be amazing, and I'm encouraged. I'm hopeful. Let's put it that way. Anything else on war? I mean, I got all of you guys here. It's not usual to have all 3 of you in the same place. Anything else on war that you would want to mention or you're enjoying?
Yeah. Fix matchmaking so that rematches don't happen within a 12 war period.
Yeah.
Or however long a damn season lasts.
Yeah. And DLL, did they ever fix the whole tier issue too? Like it's the map or... Okay. Can you explain that
just
quickly?
For people who don't know what Vega's referring to, Tier 1 and Tier 2 have identical maps with identical nodes and identical globals. They have different multipliers. If you are in Tier 1 and you match an alliance from Tier 2, this was explained to me by Kabam after a number of rather passionate emails on my end. But if you are in Tier 1 and you match an alliance in Tier 2, the game randomly decides which of the 2 maps it uses, and you get the multiplier attached to that map. I think that should always default to the higher map, because what that means is that you can be in Tier 1 for an entire season and have the exact same record as another alliance that was also in Tier 1 the entire season. And if you have the misfortune due to a whim of the matchmaking system to match a Tier 2 alliance and you lose the coin flip, you come out a significant chunk below them regardless of attack bonus. bonus.
Yeah. And just to be clear, he's not talking about the rewards that come out of it. You're talking about the actual scoring that ends up.
Right, the multiplier for the season.
Yeah. I was realizing there's some terms we're using that might not be well known to everyone. All right. Was there anything else? I don't want to shortchange this.
I feel like I do need to briefly defend the idea of getting rid of power back boosts.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, do it.
So basically where I'm coming from there is it's similar to the same way that I think all of us on this call feel at least somewhat refreshed at the idea of not just taking down certain fights with Ghost and Torch, because anything else we could come up with, even if it might be better, isn't worth experimenting on right now when we have a proven weapon over here of this caliber. And I feel like there's an awful lot in the meta right now where power back boosts do that in general. Because if a champion does not do an insane amount of actual hit damage on their special 2 or their special 3, then those boosts do almost nothing. Like, Guardian does not get nearly as much power back for the same overall amount of damage as Cosmic Ghost Rider does, because red numbers don't count. And somebody like, Spider-Man 2099 or Shang-Chi, and part of that reflects, I think, that Kabam has started to balance around them, but they're not going to go back and, take Corvus and turn his special 2 into half red numbers. And because of that, champions that are already built with those huge special 2s and special 3s just get a distorted place in the meta. And we go to them more often than not because through a quirk of the way their kits are set up, they have access to more power and more specials than anyone else in the game. And we know from masteries like Mystic Dispersion, we know from characters like Hyperion, we know how much a bunch of free power affects things.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So I think if nothing else, they should be capped. Even if they're not, I came out swinging with get rid of them, but I think if nothing else, they should be capped to a bar back.
We've got Ghost banned across almost every war, and if you took back power back boost or took away power back boost from her, it's definitely a lot more challenging of a fight. It definitely lasts a lot longer, but it's not get to SB2 game over.
It starts being a lot more important to have those Panda Man, Pete, Karate Mike level Ghost players. You can't just send anyone.
Yeah, and I'm feeling like there's some Ghost fights that she just couldn't take now, though. Like, she just flat out.
Yeah.
Doesn't she sometimes get sent to take Havoc? Or am I totally off on this one?
She does. Yes. If you can send her to a Havoc that's on a path node, or you can maybe a middle mini boss.
Yeah.
I used to take Havoc bosses with Ghost.
That's crazy.
Now that I think about it.
Yeah.
Which is hilarious because he was released as a champion who was supposed to counter crits.
Right. And all you had to do was block bait him to SB2 and make him convert his plasma and then throw your special 2.
Sometimes it's funny to hear the three of you talk because you'll say something like that. You're like, all you have to do. And I'm like, guys, no one else knows how to do that.
There's always a little bit of prayer involved. That's the secret.
All right. Well, this was awesome. I absolutely love War. I think there might have been a little bit of fanboy in me coming out, being able to actually talk with all three of you at the same time about this. So thank you so much for being part of this. In the intro, I said, all three of these guys are actually on the rankings team. How fortunate am I to have that? All of their channels are linked in the description. I will add them again, though, just so they're standing out clear. Watch these channels. I watch them to become a better player. If you've been watching my channel for the last year, you've seen I've become a significantly better player. And a large part of that is because I watched the war videos these guys put out and listened to them explain what they're doing with the champion and how they attacked that node and defender. There's a lot there. Thank you so much, all three of you, for being here. I'd like to give you the opportunity to, sign off or anything else you want to add. And we'll just, go Blaze, DLL, and then Taters.
Thanks for having us. all I
Yeah, this was an absolute blast. Tremendous respect for everyone on this call.
Yeah, agreed, man. Thanks for having us, and hope you enjoyed the editing process for this one.
It'll be enjoyable. It's a fun way to spend a Sunday. Thanks so much, everybody. Take care. I hope you either learned something, were entertained, or even better, a little bit of both. Don't forget to like, subscribe. Thanks so much for watching. Take care.
See